Okay, so now we're going to talk about the law, and we've just had a discussion as to what law could be, and we've had 3 or 4 different conceptions of the law, right? There is the law, as we're told to it by our rulers, if you like, that it's a set of rules written down that we should all live by, and if we don't, then we've sort of agreed that there's some form of social exclusion, punishment, and that can be in the form of prison, it can be in the form of having to pay a fine or in some way visibly be punished, right, for some transgression. And there is a second conception of the rule of law, which is that this is whatever a group decides are the reasons for excluding them, right? It could be whatever unacceptable behavior is within a group, and that could be as simple as not having the right table manners in some groups, right? So in that sense, each group has their own rules of law, which is whatever they actually enforce. And then a third conception of law as well. This is what powerful people are able to impose on others. It's a weapon of powerful people. And so in that sense, there are rules that apply to the unpowerful. And they have to figure them out, and they won't often be written down, or they're written down and they don't know about them, or they're applied only lower down, but not up or down. And we sort of agree that probably over time, if a society is very well functioning in its golden age, when things are going very well, there is more of this notion of, okay, this is a set of written rules that we know that we're nearly all held by, even the very top of society. It was probably never 100% thus, but it is a focal point for where we'd like to go. Let's then talk a little bit about, okay, these conceptions of what is a law, and here you can see them written down. You know, a rule you are bound by in reality. That would hence be whatever is imposed upon you. A rule your society bound you by in reality, so that has more of this notion of, okay, you're in a group. A rule you feel bound by, that would be a moral law, something that you feel is something you should do. And in a way, the punisher is yourself via a notion of conscience. A rule by God that you feel you are bound by, which is hence a religious law, right, if you feel. A right your society says you're bound by, that's this notion of what's written down or what is on the news. A rule or a right someone else bound you by. It's very much this notion of, okay, the powerful, but it could also be the parents. They bind you by rules. Rules you're encouraged to live by. This could be a group of friends. And rules right society applies to some of us is this quintessential notion of the powerful and the unpowerful. These can be very, very different. And over the centuries, you've had different words to describe them. There's this notion of a natural law, which is something that is natural to humanity, right? Some notion of, okay, harmonious living together, and if you disturb that, then that's a bad thing. There is moral laws, this notion of, well, whatever the system of moral is that there is in a society you should live by, and then there is the religious laws, which could also apply within religious institutions, but also the laws set by God, and you can then talk about formal laws that are written down. Now, the fiction of law that is very prevalent in Western society is that of justice served. I remember enjoying these videos or movies whereby in a courtroom something important is decided, and usually some baddie gets defeated by the hero lawyer and some intrepid complainant. So this is the face of the law, right? And so the face of the law is this notion, look, this is written down, you should all sort of abide by this. And this is definitely what you will find online or in ministry guidelines or in the guidelines of courts, what law is, right? You'll quickly find words like the Magna Carta, the basic laws of the land. And it's all about the law is this, the court system, the police system who finds out that some crime has been committed, some transgression of law, they find you, they gather evidence, and then a judge decides whether or not indeed you or someone else has been a criminal, and then the law is applied, justice is served, right? Now, for many, this itself, this face of the law is very complex itself, right? I've once been in courtrooms myself, in a dispute with my employer then in Brisbane. It was a legal case. I won. That was good. That was very important for my career. But it also taught me a lot about, okay, even this face of the law is highly complex. There are many different types of law. There's administrative law, criminal law, contract law, family law. And often there are different courts, different systems, different rules apply, and they come with own words like jurisdiction. Right? The notion of jurisdiction is, well, is this a law that that judge is able to decide upon? So a criminal lawyer and a criminal judge is not going to decide upon family law, right? It's a different area of law. So there's areas of law. It's a little bit like a territory. So law is also territory in this face notion. So for many types of laws, there's criminal law, different public law enforcement agencies are supposed to check on compliance. So you have the financial police, you have sort of violent-oriented police, you have theft-oriented police services, right? There are things, federal crimes, local crimes, that kind of thing, right? Public nuisance offences, that kind of thing, right? Investigative complaints, this and that, right? For some type of laws, it's private organizations that take others to court. So contract law is often enforced by one company taking another company to court, right? So it's not even the police who does something. No, they just go to court and say, oh, this contract has been violated. Here's the evidence. They were supposed to pay this bill. They didn't pay this bill. That would be typically something, right? Or they were supposed to give me good goods, but look what they've delivered, right? And so that doesn't even require police. That requires a legal system, right? Now, there are different types of courts, there are different types of laws, constitutional courts, criminal courts, and all that. And then there are international courts, so countries can take each other to court, like the International Court of Justice. An individual often can't sort of bring a complaint, but a country can bring a complaint, which means a government has to bring a complaint against another government. Right? Now, how many different types of courts and international treaties do you think there are? A rough guess.
Where?
Let's say in the UK. You know, how many does the UK agree that there is, as it were, a legal system for with its own separate court or judge system?
Well, for some reason I want to say 12, but I suppose there's way more than that.
Hundreds.
Not thousands?
Maybe thousands, but it's actually hard to know. It's actually hard to know. Hundreds or thousands. That's right.
It's like the stars.
That's right.
Like between countries and everything?
Between countries and everything, and you know, for instance, you know, there's a whaling convention. Who judges whether or not the whalers have been transgressing? Well, that's a separate court system. And then the Antarctic Convention, and there's the Missile Convention, and there's a European Court of Justice, and zillions and zillions, and many of them have to do with commercial companies taking countries to court. Right? Lots of secret things.
And The Hague?
The Hague,
Yeah.
those are the big ones. Those are the big ones. Those are the big ones. So, I haven't put them on these ones, but for instance, the UK recognises, at latest count, 15,000 international treaties. 15,000. And many of them are bilateral, you know, England with the US, England with the EU, or Britain with the EU. And they all have some kind of arbitration mechanism. Some sort of, well, if there's a dispute, this is the way we're going to solve it. That's then the ultimate court. And often these are secret international agreements with maybe there is a court for it or maybe there's not. The rest of the world may not even know whether or not there's a court that would judge, you know, whether some treaty between, let's say, Britain and Kazakhstan has been violated or not, right? Or laws to do with media, or laws to do with intellectual property right, or pharmaceutical goods, right? There are just a whole lot of courts, which almost no one else knows that there are, in secret international treaties that you will not be able to look up. So even the face of the law, this notion of this is the judge that judges, we don't even know where it is, right? Right? There could be people who are judges with whom you don't know. Now let's then talk about things which are quintessentially the population. So, you know, criminal acts. Okay. Do you think, or would you feel that if you're ostensibly criminal, you murder someone, you attack them with a knife, or someone gets raped, that the law would apply? Right? What do you think? Is that something which would be true in your lives, in your country?
How good's the evidence I did it?
It's very poorly applied, and certainly there's a lot of recent examples of it not being. So, I mean, we have this notion that there should be a point at which that happens, but what's kind of even in the public eye lately, we're seeing that none of it is. So
I reckon murder in most cases is applied reasonably. Sort of like, okay, like the perpetrator might be smart enough. It's basically, are they smarter than the police? That it was pre-calculated, so that it's sort of, you know, it's just a question of does the murderer get caught? But if people actually figure out who did it, I think murder is usually applied. The rest, less so, basically.
Well, murder is an interesting one because it's very visible. Now, of course, not all murders are known, right? I mean, if the murderer manages to hide the body, then there is no recorded crime immediately. There's a missing person. And if the missing person is not somebody who's important, then maybe it doesn't even get recorded as a missing person. Nobody even knows they're missing because they're unimportant. This would happen if you murder a migrant, for instance, right?
It can be decades before the evidence fully, like, you know, when they've re-dug up stuff. And
exactly, they suddenly found
stuff like decades down the track or even after.
And of course, if a country murders in another country, that is very often very difficult to find out and punish. But let's then think of murders inside a country that are sort of easily seen. Somebody's shot, right, in a restaurant, let's say, or somebody's found poisoned in their home, right? Men shoot, women poison. That's roughly speaking how they murder, right? That's on average how that goes, right? And you're more likely to get away with it if you poison someone, if you shoot someone. So you may say the men are the dumb murderers, right?
Is this an advice session?
No, it's not. I'm surely not telling you anything you didn't already know. But okay, if something is noticed, then society has a large incentive to try and figure out what it was, right? And as a rule of thumb, murders are sort of there's sort of two main categories of murders, right? One is domestic murders, more likely a husband or a man enraged killing his wife. That's fairly often, less often a wife killing the husband, but it also does happen, right? And basically criminal executions, so wars between criminal gangs. That is the majority of murders, right? Usually territorial disputes over who gets to sell drugs somewhere or who gets to organize prostitution somewhere, but basically over market territory. So you may say it's free markets in action when, you know, some drug lord is gunned down in a restaurant, right? That's okay. That's real free markets, as it were, right? Where violence too is just another commodity for sale, right? So those two, and the domestic ones are nearly always solved, right? They're easier to solve because, well, if somebody's killed inside their home, there's not many suspects, right? And usually the friends and family know whether there were tensions and what is likely to have happened, right?
But recently, like, a lot of people that die suddenly, like, the coroner isn't doing the because it used to be the coroner. Like, if you thought that there was suspicious circumstance, it used to be the coroner that would check it all out and find out how somebody actually died. But a lot of that's not happening these days. So.
Okay, I wouldn't know. There still has to be a cause of death for everybody, a death certificate which says a natural cause of death or not. So that system is still around.
But it's
But I want to give you some idea as to the difficulties with even applying that kind of law, which in a way is not truly controversial, right? None of us wants to see a murder or a rape or a stabbing, and we sort of all agree, okay, this is something we'd want to see punished, right? It's not even the powerful inflicting their notion of justice on the rest of society. You know, this is sort of the heartland of what we think the rule of law should be, right? Well, let's have a look at what actually happens, and let's pick rapes in the UK, right? Now, politicians in the UK like to promise that all women raped, and usually it's women, sometimes men, by other men usually then, will get justice, right? Justice will be served. The perpetrators will be hunted down and put in front of a court. So let's look at some sobering statistics, right? So in 2018 to 19, almost 60,000 rapes were reported. That means, usually speaking, a woman goes to the police and said, look, I've been raped, this person or these persons have done it, here's the evidence, or, you know, I'm willing to subject myself to a medical examination. And those 60,000 rapes, you should think that there were less than 2,000 convictions. So 1 in 30 of the reported rapes led to a conviction, if you like. And an eventual conviction is then, okay, a court or a confession says, okay, this person has been convicted, and then, as it were, is openly punished for the crime of rape, right? Now, I mean, my personal belief is that the vast majority of the reported rapes, if somebody goes to the police, the vast majority of that probably is a rape, right? In the view of what society would count, right? But even that, only a tiny, tiny percentage leads to a conviction. And it's handy to think of why. Why is this so difficult? Well, one is that on average, a case takes almost 3 years to get to court. So between the time that a woman shows up at the police office and it shows up in court, it's almost 3 years. Well, by that time, she wants to get on with her life. She's got other priorities. All kinds of things may have happened that she doesn't want to spend 3 years of her life before the court and then the court itself to get justice. It's kind of like, I want to forget about this. I want to do something else. So in almost 2/3 of the cases, things get withdrawn before the court, right? That's when the police and the prosecutor say, okay, we've got enough evidence, which is only true for about 10% of the cases. And then 2/3 of those, usually it's the woman who says, I can't be bothered with this. You know, this just reopens the trauma and I don't actually want this. And so then you might say the perpetrator gets away with it because he's outlasted the woman. But also the system is slow. And why is the system slow? I mean, think of this from the point of view of the court. Is it a good or a bad thing if it takes an awful long time and lots of deliberations and safety checks? Is that a good or a bad thing if you're the court system?
Well, in this case, it's a bad system because 200 days is way too much.
800 days.
800
days.
It's way too
But
much.
it's great for the courts because they're getting paid.
Oh, for the court, yeah, it's great, but for actual
Industry,
reality, it's terrible.
Yeah,
It's
but
there's a whole industry around it, and
Exactly.
everybody's
More
getting
than 2
their
years.
Ka-ching.
ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching.
Ka-ching, 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 right? So
Yeah.
put your
Plus-
economist hat on.
Plus the patriarchy.
Well,
Each case takes more than 800.
no, on average. On average. Some longer, some less long, right? So a case on average, right? But indeed, for an industry point of view, the longer the better. You know, the more investigation it takes, this and that. And you can imagine what their open reasons for this would be. Imagine, what does an industry say? Why does it take so long?
Well, we don't want any false convictions. We want to make sure that we get
Thorough. That. Exactly. So they use your own desire for justice against you. Right? They hoist you by that petard, basically. You want to be thorough, you want to have everyone listened to. Goes the court system. Now we've got you, right? You want something that's very expensive, but of course we'll deliver, right? That's how that goes, right? Then, of course, well, these are the women who show up at the police. Most women, they don't want to think about it at all, and they, knowing this, but also,
I mean, it's well known that women are poorly treated in that whole thing, and it's still about, what are you wearing, and did you have a drink, and did you lean them on, and
that kind of thing.
That consciousness.
That kind of thing.
is still happening. So
That kind of thing.
it's the women being persecuted for.
Well,
watching
I don't yet want to moralize this. I first want to look at the facts, and then, morals, of course, are involved in this. But there is this notion of, look, only very few go to the police, right? Because, well, they know it'll be a lengthy process, but even if it's not a lengthy process, even if we're a process of 2 days, court cases are visible. you are now a rape victim to see for all your family, all your friends. This will be part of your known history for the rest of your life. Many women don't want that, independent of whether or not it's long, they believe this and that. It's kind of like, you know, I just don't want this known.
So a fair amount of rape is in the family. So.
A fair amount of rape is in the family, that's right. A fair amount is in the family, so that is highly disruptive to the family. And often things are hushed up, that as well. But there are estimates around. And of course, you know, more women-oriented organizations come up with a higher estimate of, okay, how few rapes get reported. So this is from one of the women's groups. They say 1 in 100. Others say, you know, ONS is maybe 1 in 10. But it's a large proportion that is not reported. Way more than half, right? I mean, that is sort of that is not controversial, that only a small percentage of actual rapes will get reported, right? So, okay, 60,000. So of an actual rape, if 1 in 100 leads to a conviction, that would be a huge amount, right? There's no way that that'd be as much as 1 in 100. Well, think of this from the rapist's point of view. So in 99 out of the 100 cases, they get away with it, and 97 out of 100, there's not even a looming court case. You know, there's not even, you know, a questioning by the police and this and that. So on average, you get away with this. Think of the incentives, you know, if you're sort of drunk on a night. Then also think of this from a societal point of view, right? The cost of actually going through the court case, the investigation, hundreds of thousands of euros, hundreds of thousands. Again, from the industry point of view, this is ka-ching. This is ka-ching. Rape is big business, right? Unfortunately, the women may not feel that way, but for the police and for the justice system, this is a whole lot of jobs, right? Bring it on, basically, right? And so no wonder that they say, oh, we want women to come forward. Of course they do. That's business walking through the door, right? She may be in trauma, but they're waiting for more trauma. And then suppose somebody gets convicted and sent to prison. I don't know, you know, the average rape, I don't know, 6 or 10 years maybe. You know, it's something that society does care about. Well, a prison place itself, to make that, this is one of the estimates of a few years ago, is £120,000, which is about 140,000 euros. And then the annual cost of keeping this guy in prison is £40,000, almost 50,000 euros. So that's again ka-ching. So the prison system wins in these, and these are big numbers. But also think of, okay, so if we were somehow magically to convict all rapists, the prisons would be full. In fact, they'd be overflowing. We'd have to build new prisons at an alarming rate, and it would cost billions. So I did a back-of-the-envelope calculation in my usual way, and I figured out that if you convict all rapes in the UK, that's going to cost more than £45 billion per year. The entire budget of the legal system, which is not just rape, but also murder and financial crimes and theft and all the contract stuff, the entire budget is 15 billion euros. So just rapes alone, if the system would actually, in the current way it operates, get everyone convicted, it would exhaust the budget 3 times over, and all other forms of law would no longer be enforced or lead to convictions.
So the cost is borne by the legal system,
taxpayer.
Not by the...
Taxpayer, yeah.
Okay.
Eventually taxpayer, right?
Yeah.
Because they fund the legal system. The legal system is a public good.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it's not charged to the woman who's the victim.
No.
Kind of thing.
No.
Yeah.
No. But of course, she loses a lot of time and emotion.
Yeah,
I mean, that is, of
yeah.
course, also priceless, right? So think now of, okay, you're the chief of police and you know these numbers. You know that practically speaking, you just don't have the budget to do more than a tiny trickle of investigation, a tiny trickle of convictions. And you may hate that. You may bang on the door of the minister saying, we need to have a 100-fold increase in budget. But you've got a fixed budget. And you may like or loathe it. If you loathe it, well, you can always resign. what are you going to do as a chief of police in order to have the maximum amount of justice, and you can't change the justice system? What do you do?
Reform the system.
Well, but you got to live with it now. Of course you call for reforms, but you live with it now. What do?
You don't process some cases.
Exactly, you prioritize. You pick the most likely cases, which you think you've got the best evidence for, so that you can at least say, look, these cases, we got justice for that. So you ruthlessly prioritize. Now, how do you get rid of the vast majority of women who say, I've been raped?
Tell them how horrible it'll be to deal with.
Yeah, you tell them the truth. There's that.
Yeah.
There's something else you do, and you've already mentioned it.
You
Treat
ask
them
for
like
their
shit.
you ask for their phone records.
You ask for their phone records. That's right.
Yeah.
That killed most cases. And that also led to a huge decrease in rapes reported to the police. And why was that the case? Why did the chief of commissioner, who was at the time, I recall, a woman, say, no, we got to have the phone records of an accusing woman? Why do you think that was the
Well,
case?
supposedly it's about, well, if you were friends with the person, then we can't prove that it was rape, and therefore it's like, it's less likely to have a successful outcome.
And sometimes, unfortunately, like the big problem with this is that women are nice
Yeah.
societally, and oftentimes they don't say to like directly this or that. Like they keep on being nice and friendly to the guy.
Mm-hmm.
And showing it in the reports, like, but what are you talking about if the conversation, like, tone did not really change out
Exactly.
of what is seen?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So
Yeah.
there were a couple of high-profile cases in the UK whereby, the phone records were not open. There was an accusation. The police believed that there was evidence, and it came to the court. And well, would you want every guy to be convicted, or would you want him to have a chance in court as well to defend himself? Would you want?
Well, it is important. Sometimes there are false accusations, obviously.
But it's very low. So
Yeah, it is. It is very
like,
low. I
on
agree,
balance,
but like,
but you also don't want those people to be.
So,
Well, looking at these numbers, this system seems to think it's about 50-50
How do you
when it
mean?
comes to.
So false accusations can exist, but there's also, is there a grey area whereby he may sincerely not think it is rape or this or that, and she may sincerely think it is?
Oh,
Is there a grey area?
so
Absolutely.
many times.
Yeah.
So many times.
Like even
Yeah.
in interpersonal, like established relationships and marriage, I didn't know about that for a very long time.
Yeah.
But somebody told me that there is such a thing as marriage rape.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
basically
for sure.
the woman just doesn't
Yeah,
get
yeah.
consent, but husband thinks that
Yeah.
it's a normal thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this whole thing about consent, like
Yeah.
if there's real consent, and
Yeah.
It's also the sort of, they had sex and the woman regrets it later and sort of,
Well,
And
Get-
that's the problem.
and
That's
then
the problem,
like
really.
does that also sort of
Yeah, or blackmails
So
blackmails the
the-
guy. I'm going to accuse you of rape
exactly.
unless you marry
Rapes
me. That kind of thing. That
Yeah,
happens.
but
She's
this
upset
point,
that
it's
she
not-
left them.
It's not
Like-
rape.
Yeah, or the
it's just-
relationship breaks down. It can be either
Yeah,
side just
and
causing
then things get
trouble.
reinterpreted,
Yeah.
right?
Nasty,
So
causing-
with the notion that men are assholes, women are nice, it ain't so simple, right? There's problems both ways.
In most cases,
And-
it is the thing, but like there always.
There always are. And so, we agree that the guy must have his chance in court as well. And what evidence would he come up with? And in these famous court cases, it was indeed, look at what supposedly happened the day after. She said, what a wonderful night, looking forward to seeing you again. Isn't that
Wouldn't that be his phone records, though?
his
So
phone
he's-
records?
Yeah,
But that is his evidence,
so-
right? And then the phone company would say, yeah, no, she did really send that. And what is a judge to make of that? What is a judge to make of that? Okay, there's police evidence. She says that. Okay, there's evidence of having sex. She says it was non-consensual. He said, look, she thanks me afterwards, this and that. And Darius, women are nice, maybe. But what is a judge to make of that? If his story is then, well, later on she soured and did and that. Is that reasonable doubt? And the reality of the judge is, yes, that's reasonable doubt. And so for the police commission, that's kind of like, okay, we don't want this embarrassment and these huge costs, and hence the other cases which were more likely to win. So they said, look, yeah, this is going to be a new rule. Anybody who comes forth with an accusation of rape, we're going to have to see the phone records. And that, from a system point of view, took care of it, right? That led to a huge decrease in number of reported rapes and hence got the pressure off the system to deal with the enormous glut of rape accusation that was coming through the system, as women believed, oh, finally, you know, we're now going to believe and get justice. And from a system point of view, these sort of made sense, right? These made sense. I mean, the police commissioner was unfortunately just doing her job. And of course, this immediately then led women's rights groups to say, oh, this is an unfair rule and this and that, and now they're fighting against that. But for the system, it's kind of, okay, well, we'll worry about, you know, if this gets overturned as a rule. But this also gets the deeper question. How on earth would you have a system in which the majority of rapes does lead to justice? What would that system look like? Because the court system as it is now has no chance. The police system has no chance. What kind of system would have a chance to basically avenge or enforce justice for most rape cases? What would that look like?
Well, a system in which you're allowed, if dueling is allowed, you can to some degree solve most rape cases because you just allow the brother or uncle or whatever it is of the victim to sort of directly go at whoever the rapist is. Exactly. So a system in which the vast majority would probably get justice and avenged is whereby probably the male protectors or the male family members or friends of the woman, they just beat up the perpetrator, right, or kill him, right? So those societies in a way don't have a written rule of law, they don't have a court system, they may not even have a police, but you may say they have much more justice and much more rule of law than the ones supposedly with the law of the land. But it also made me appreciate, yeah, you know what, tribal traditions may not all be so bad, right? Because these are tough things, right? And the Western system basically fails completely when it comes to rapes, right? I mean, it's almost hard to think of a more torturous system than the Western system. The only thing really would benefit you get out of the Western system is that you've got this enormous judiciary. They benefit from this, but the women don't benefit from it. Okay. Now let's go outside of the realm of rape, right, which is well documented at least, and get sobering figures and quotes on other aspects of the supposed rule of law. So the first question is, well, how much law is there? Well, in the US, the Code of Federal Regulation a couple of years ago was already 175,000 pages. Who knows even one page of regulations in this room? How many people do you think would have read more than 1,000? That's got to be...
There are some autistic nerds.
Exactly.
People with photographic memory.
So I think we can all agree there will not be a person alive who's truly read them all, because even an autistic nerd cannot read as quick as new laws get written. So nobody truly can know what the law is. And do you think these laws are all consistent with each other or inconsistent with each other?
Inconsistent, but ChatGPT might be.
Inconsistent. And why? Because, well, a parliament wants to push forward new laws because of something they care about. Can they check the 175,000 pages to make sure that what the new law is doesn't conflict with a previous law? No, they can't. So the reality of the law-making system is lots of new laws get made without really knowing what the other laws are. It's kind of, well, we'll throw this one in the mix as well. So the law is a jungle of lots of conflicting laws. And I discovered this during my court case. Oh, bloody hell. It doesn't matter if you are behaving according exactly to what one law says you should behave as. If there's another law you violated, then the powerful can say, you violated that law. You say, yeah, but I followed the procedures there. We don't care. You violated this law. Oh my God, this gives discretion. And it gives discretion to people with money, to people with authority. So this huge amount of legislation basically kills the idea of the rule of law. But from a politician point of view, you don't care about that. You're promising justice for that. You're grandstanding. That's a quick win. And the fact that you're killing the actual idea of the rule of law, who cares about that? That's the problem for the next election cycle, right? So one is there's far too much, right? An income tax, which is one of the tax laws, is together with supplements and case law over 100,000 pages already, right? That's just one tax law, right? Regulations. And so one of the estimates have been, and I've got reference for that, and it's not clear that it's 100% true, but there's been legal scholars who have been saying, look, the average person in the US unknowingly breaks at least 3 federal criminal laws, which hence goes to the notion that there's so much law that is so inconsistent that even though you try to live according to the rules of the land, you're breaking laws all the time. Now, does this mean that if you'd have a perfect system, everybody should be in jail? Practically speaking, yes.
What kind of examples have you got for that? The 3 federal criminal laws?
It could be trespassing where you're not allowed to be. It could be breaking intellectual property right laws, right? So stealing things on the internet without even knowing that could be a criminal law. It could be not paying the taxes.
By sending an email
traffic.
with a meme in it that is intellectual property, right?
Yep, there's a lot of that, right? Also saying things to people which are defamatory, there's a lot of that, right? The defamation law, which is in principle a criminal thing, I think, is also something that people engage in all the time, but most people get away with defamation laws, right? False accusation, this and that, as soon as you shout to someone, so, well, you may in fact be breaking a law by shouting that, but don't worry, everybody else does it too.
Underage drinking, underage smoking, underage sex, trespassing in the territory. It happens all the time.
It happens all the time. So that makes you think even, okay, what do I actually mean by law? And do I want a rule of law? None of us in this room should want the laws that we have to be enforced. Well, that's a strange notion of law, or even what we want the law to be. It's a very, very difficult country. So this is over-criminalization, it's called, and it's been discussed in the literature by legal scholars for decades, and they of course say, we should do something about this, we should harmonize laws. Do you think, and there have been many wonderful ways tried, do you think that any attempt to harmonize laws have worked? In, the dozens of countries who tried it? No, it only leads to more law. And why? 175 pages, but they're all there for some good reason. Somebody wanted the new laws. And as soon as you say, well, we scrap this, then some stakeholder says, you shouldn't scrap that. So getting rid of law is very difficult. And to actually work out how inconsistent 175 pages are with each other is like an impossible task. It can't be done. It's too difficult. So it's not done, right? I mean, after years of sort of wrangling and going through 10,000 of pages, a committee comes out with 21 recommendations to scrap these clauses. Right, we've saved 2 pages, and meanwhile, Parliament has approved another 20,000. Right? That is the reality of these kind of efforts. So in a way, we have no idea what to do about this. No idea. Right? Historically speaking, there's only been really one way in which we got rid of regulations, which was for society to collapse. So Kafka wrote about the Austro-Hungarian Empire, about its absurdities. We don't have these absurdities anymore. Why not? The empire lost a war and was disbanded. Suddenly none of its rules and regulations apply, and the victors, which were either the Soviets or the Americans, took over the territory, and they imposed their own much leaner laws. That's how this goes, right? So the collapse of stupidity comes via losing on the battlefield. So, well, would you want your country to lose on the battlefield? Is that worth it, to sort out some bad laws? Yeah, that's a tough one too, right?
Do we
losing to?
Sorry?
Who are we losing to?
Exactly. It matters whom you're losing to. You get, so that's right. A true statement, indeed, sort of picks the enemy it wants to lose from, and then undermines his own army enough to make sure you lose to that one. That could be the height of statementhood, right? And this has happened, by the way. The Swedes have once done this, but it's a long story. So this is tough territory, right? I mean, it's kind of this monster that is an industry that's totally dysfunctional, of which you even wouldn't want it to be able to enforce all the laws, because then we'd all be in prison. Bloody hell, what do you do? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. So what is the meaning? Well, one is courtroom justice is just a myth. It's a pleasant and soothing lullaby for the gullible, right? So the people who lap up courtroom dramas are in essence looking at the marketing genius of a totally dysfunctional, far too large industry which doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So the rule of law is an industry sales pitch. That's how you should see that, right? It's an industry sales pitch. And it is hence a mythology that is sold to the rest of the population, and you hope they don't find out, basically, right? And lawfare, which is whereby rich and powerful people take other people to court who are less rich and less powerful, is rife. So the court indeed is a weapon of the rich and powerful, because, well, if the federal regulation is 175 pages, you can always find something for your opponent. So I believe Elon Musk at this very moment is fighting off dozens of court cases and new ones get added. Dogs of fleas, billionaires of lawfare accusations against them. Whether true or not doesn't even matter. This is how the game now goes, right? Large corporations don't just have one court case. They've got a whole legal department which is fighting off court cases and starting court cases against the other large industries, right? So, as it were, the equality of each dollar. I might say each dollar is equally represented in court. That's a nice way to think of the current legal system.
Is it though? I thought the next sentence is like the lower class dollar isn't represented.
The lower class doesn't have a dollar.
That don't have as many dollars.
They don't have a dollar.
Yeah.
So if I have $1 million and you have one, well, they're represented equally.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. $1, one vote, right?
Yeah.
So the main social role within our societies is, and that functions rather well, even in the US, is it's very good at picking up poor criminals from lower classes. And for instance, an average statistics I once saw is that something like half of all black men in the US at some point have been in prison, something like that. And from an industry point of view, well, it works very good at that. If you manage to get half of a group that is 12% of society into prison, well, then you got that going very quickly, haven't you? Right? That's got all kinds of extra ways in which it allows that to make it happen. And you may see that as a weapon of the powerful to the unpowerful as well. But that is its main social role in Britain too. If you go to the prisons, it's full of people who basically have low mental acuity, low mental health, and they're often the dumb criminals who ran risk for the smart criminals. And the smarter, richer criminals are often sort of middle class or upper class people who get away with it. And their minions who get caught, drugs runners, enforcers, they're the ones in prison when they get found out. Plus, of course, the men who beat their wives or kill other men, that kind of thing. Okay, yes, we're almost there for a break. So what then does constrain the powerful? Can they get away with everything, right? Well, not everything. But one answer is other powerful people. They keep themselves in check, right? So these large corporations keep each other in check. Expectations of the population, you can't do everything. So if the rich really were going on a murderous rampage in front of everybody taking selfies, they probably would not get away with that, right? But they get away with an awful lot. And laws that the population and politicians are particularly focused on, so it could be something that is in the news or something that they particularly care about. It could be collaboration with the Russians if you're now in the US, something like that, right? The mandates of powerful organizations, so this is again, the notion of, well, some of the powerful actually want some laws to be upheld, particularly, for instance, property right laws. They want their property right laws to be upheld. Sometimes the media gossip, which is this gossip can be the weapon of the weak, right? Which is, well, okay, you can't go to the courts. And for instance, if you're a raped woman, you may not go to the police, but you can tell all the friends, and you can basically make life socially impossible for a guy. That could be the way you get your revenge, right? So the media and gossip is true, also something that constrains the powerful, particularly inside private organizations, actually, in companies. Gossip can be a very effective tool of the weak to get some notion of justice against the powerful. And so in a very vague sense are these matters codified, and very infrequently are they championed by something official. So I hope next time you see the notion of the law, you say, oh, okay, this is all very different from how it's presented. Now, and I will ask this at the end of the next lesson, or at the end of today, can you think of a real reform of the legal system? How would you do it? And does morality constrain the legal system or the law at all?